My name is Celeste Marlowe, and at 37 I came home to a note on my kitchen counter that said my husband had sold our house without telling me. Just like that, 12 years of marriage gone with a scribbled line on the back of a bill. Except, he forgot one thing. The house wasn't in his name, and while he was gambling away our savings and planning his escape, I was quietly building an empire he never saw coming. If you've ever been underestimated or erased, this story is for you. Like, comment, or subscribe to hear how it all unfolded. The note was crooked, like it had been tossed without care, just a thin sheet from the back of our electric bill torn and curling at the edges. Derek's handwriting was rushed, almost illegible, but I would have recognized it anywhere. I'm done. I've sold the house. Take what's left. Derek. At first, I just stood there in the silence of my own kitchen, my keys still dangling from my fingers, grocery bags slumped at my feet. My eyes scanned the message once, twice, a third time, trying to connect the scratchy ink to some version of reality. My hand went to my chest, not for drama, but instinct, like trying to keep my heart from breaking loose. We'd been married 12 years. A part of me expected to crumble, but I didn't. My breath hitched once, just once, and then something else took over. A steadiness, not numbness. Something stronger. Like the kind of stillness you get before a storm breaks, except this time, I was the storm. I set the bag on the counter, lifted the note carefully, and stared at the audacity of it. Sold the house. He thought he could just erase me with a sentence. I pulled out my phone, typed a reply with a calm I didn't fully feel, and hit send. Saw your note. Thanks for the heads up. The kitchen clock ticked on like nothing had changed. But everything had. My name is Celeste Marlowe. I'm 37, and I run a handcrafted jewelry business from the converted sunroom of the home I shared with Derek. What started as a few beaded necklaces on Etsy turned into something real enough to pay for our last vacation, and the new roof Derek said we couldn't afford. He always called it your little hobby. Said it with that polite smirk he reserved for things he didn't think mattered. I'd be lying if I said I didn't love him once. When we first met, Derek was the kind of man who ordered my drink before I could decide who left notes on the bathroom mirror and walked me home after my night classes. He helped me set up my first online store. He even poured champagne the night I made my first $1,000. But something shifted when the business started growing. The more successful I became, the colder he got. I remember the first time he really cut me down. I had landed a small contract with a local boutique, a big step for someone working solo. I came home excited, glowing. He didn't look up from his laptop. That's nice, honey, he said, but don't let it get in the way of real work around here. He meant the laundry. Then came the comments at dinner parties, the subtle jabs. Celeste makes jewelry in the guest room. It keeps her busy while I handle the numbers. And always the same chuckles from his friends. I'd laugh too back then. I'm not sure why. Maybe I thought it was harmless. Maybe I thought that's what love was, making room for someone else's ego. But over the last year, something shifted in me. It started small. I noticed that our joint account had odd withdrawals. Derek said they were business investments and waved it off like I was a child asking about taxes. But the numbers didn't add up. So I started writing things down. Quietly. In a little notebook I kept tucked behind my gemstones. Dates, times, amounts, patterns. I didn't know what I was looking for at first, just that I couldn't afford not to look. And when I saw more transfers, bigger ones, I reached out to the one person I trusted completely, Alyssa Truitt. We met in college. Back then, she was the loud one in our dorm, the girl who wore power blazers to 8 a.m. lectures and told off professors for talking over her. Now she was a successful divorce attorney in the city, sharp as hell and loyal like blood. I don't want a divorce, I said over coffee. Not yet. I just want to understand what's happening. Alyssa didn't push. She just nodded and helped me map things out. Showed me how to open a business account under my LLC, explained what counts as marital assets, helped me get my name solely on the house deed when we refinanced during last spring's renovation, something Derek had let me handle because he was too slammed with work. He never even asked what he was signing. So no, I wasn't naive. I was careful. I was patient. And now, standing in the kitchen where I used to pack his lunches, reading a coward's goodbye scrawled on the back of a bill, I felt something close to gratitude. He thought this note would break me. He had no idea I'd been preparing for the day he walked out. I folded the paper, slid it into a drawer, and walked into the sunroom. My tools were still laid out from this morning's order: silver wire small rubies, the half-finished pendant for a client in Vermont. I picked up my pliers, rolled my shoulders back, and smiled to myself. Let him think he's won. Let him think I'll panic, that I'll fall apart without his permission or paycheck. Derek underestimated me. But worse, he misunderstood me. Because I never needed him to stay. I only needed time to reclaim what was already mine. It was the Christmas bracelet that first shattered something inside me, not because of what it was, but because of what it revealed. He handed it to me with that performative smile, the kind he used in boardrooms. A small box with crisp wrapping, a velvet ribbon, a little too neat to have come from him, really. I opened it expecting nothing, and still I was disappointed. A silver chain with a heart-shaped charm, pretty at a glance. Too pretty, in fact. It gleamed like sterling, but the weight was off, and the clasp thin, hollow. I knew it was a knockoff before he even kissed my cheek. "I saw it and thought of you," Derek said, slipping the chain around my wrist. "It's Tiffany, right?" I wanted to laugh. I'd worked with metal for years. I knew every cut, every stamp, every fake. It wasn't Tiffany. It wasn't even stainless. It was costume jewelry, mass-produced, the kind sold in airport kiosks or gas stations posing as gift shops. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, thanked him, and stared at the tiny fake diamond until it blurred. Later that night, I placed the bracelet in the back of my supply drawer behind the discount charms I'd never used. I told myself it was just a careless mistake, that maybe he didn't know the difference. But deep down, I did know. The bracelet wasn't just a bad gift. It was a symbol. He didn't see me not who I really was, not what mattered to me. He wanted a version of me he could wrap in velvet, pretend was special, and then forget. That spring, we hosted a dinner party for Derek's colleagues. It was the usual spread wine too dry for my taste charcuterie he made me arrange because I had the eye for detail. I wore one of my own necklaces, something bold I'd designed for a new collection. When one of the wives complimented it, Derek chuckled before I could answer. "She made that in her studio." "Well, I call it a studio. It's really the sunroom," he said with a smirk. "Keeps her busy while I deal with the tax code." The group laughed politely. I smiled, too tight, practiced, but inside I was boiling. I wanted to scream that my business wasn't a hobby, that I had clients in 3 states and more orders than I could fill without staying up until midnight most nights. Instead, I topped off my wine and excused myself to the kitchen, my throat burning with humiliation. A few weeks later, I signed a deal with a mid-size retail chain. My biggest contract yet, 10 designs, 6 stores, a launch campaign. I came home elated, expecting at least a hint of pride. I'd even stopped by the bakery on the way and picked up our favorite lemon cake. He didn't look up from his phone. "That's nice, honey," he said, scrolling through sports scores. "Congrats." That night, I sat alone on the patio with a slice of untouched cake, staring up at a sky so wide it made me feel invisible. Not even small, just unseen. My chest ached, but it wasn't sadness. It was rage. Not explosive, not loud. It was quieter than that. Focused. Sharp. Something had to change. I didn't say anything immediately. I didn't storm out or threaten divorce. That's not how I work. I started by listening, watching, paying closer attention. Derek had always handled our finances. He said it was easier that way since he was the numbers guy. I let him mostly because I was busy building the business. But one afternoon I logged in to pay our electricity bill and noticed a pattern: regular transfers to an unfamiliar account. Not business expenses. Not credit card payments. Something else. When I asked, he barely looked up. "Just investment stuff," he said. "You wouldn't get it. It's complicated." I let it go. Outwardly, anyway. The next morning I called Maya. My younger sister had always been the rational one. She worked at Ridgepoint Credit Union where Derek kept one of his secondary accounts. We'd made an unspoken rule over the years, keep family and finances separate. But this time I needed her. We met at a cafe near her branch. She hesitated before speaking, fingers wrapped tightly around her cup. "I probably shouldn't be saying this," she said quietly, "but I've seen the activity. He's moving large sums. Personal accounts, not business." "Something's off, Celeste." I felt something cold and solid settle in my stomach. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. "I think you need to protect yourself." So I did. I called Alyssa again this time, not for questions, but for action. We met after her last client meeting, both of us in yoga pants and sweatshirts the way we used to in college when we pulled all-nighters. She listened, eyes sharp, and didn't once tell me I was overreacting. Form the LLC, separate account, track everything. And during the refinance, put the deed in your name only. Quietly. We planned it like a strategy game, one move at a time. One piece at a time. Derek had asked for a new bathroom last fall, said it would increase the home's value. He was too busy to come to the closing appointment when we refinanced to fund the project. I had him sign the documents while he was on a work call, waving them in front of him while he nodded and said, "Yeah, whatever you need." That signature gave me full ownership. He never once asked to see the paperwork, never read the fine print. Looking back now, I realize the cracks had been forming for years. Not all at once, not in big ways. Just little fractures, ignored birthdays, snide comments, dismissive glances. Until finally the illusion we'd both been pretending to live in began to collapse. I wasn't innocent in all of it. I played along for too long. Smiled when I should have spoken up. Shrunk myself to keep the peace. But I was done shrinking. I was learning how to stretch. The next morning arrived like any other soft light through the blinds, the faint smell of jasmine from the bush outside, the quiet tick of the kitchen clock. But I wasn't fooled. I knew what kind of day this would be. I was sipping coffee when the email notification pinged on my laptop. The subject line chilled me. Urgent sale documents. Property at 214 Blackstone Lane. My stomach tightened. I opened the email. "Hi, Celeste. Following up on Derek Marlowe's request to expedite the sale of your home, please find attached the listing forms for signature and return. He mentioned you'd be packing this weekend. Let me know if there's a delay. Trevor Wyatt." Crestview Realty attached were PDFs of a listing agreement, a property disclosure form, and a note in the margin. Seller has already agreed verbally. We just need the final signatures to move forward. I stared at the screen. It was surreal, like reading a bad script written by someone who didn't know the plot. Trevor Wyatt. I remembered the name. Derek had mentioned him once over dinner, saying he was a go-getter who could flip anything in under 30 days. Of course he'd gone to Trevor. I clicked. Reply took a breath and typed slowly, deliberately. "Hi, Trevor. There's been a misunderstanding. I haven't authorized any sale of the property, nor do I intend to. Please be advised that I am the sole legal owner of 214 Blackstone Lane. Any future inquiries should come through my legal counsel. Celeste Marlowe." I hit send and closed the laptop with care, like shutting the lid on something rotting. My phone buzzed almost instantly. "Derek, sign the papers. You have 24 hours to pack. No greeting, no explanation. Just entitlement dressed up as instruction." I didn't respond. Instead, I stood, took my cup to the sink, and watched sunlight catch on the gold trim. I imagined Derek storming around his office, certain I'd crumble, call him plead. He had no idea who he was dealing with anymore. I walked to the living room and dialed Alyssa. She picked up on the first ring. "I was expecting your call," she said. "It's time," I replied. There was no ceremony to it, no dramatic pause, just those two words. We'd rehearsed this for months, quietly, carefully, like dancers learning their steps. "Okay," she said. "I'll file the petition and initiate the freeze on the joint accounts. We'll serve him Monday." A strange calm settled over me, not peace exactly, but clarity. Like standing at the edge of something vast and knowing I had everything I needed to cross. Trevor called an hour later. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi, Trevor," I said evenly. "Celeste. Hey, listen, I'm really sorry for the confusion. I was under the impression you and Derek had already." "You were misinformed," I said gently but firmly. "Derek doesn't have legal authority to sell this house. The deed's in my name. Always has been since the renovation last year." There was a pause. I could almost hear him recalculating. "Oh, I see. He was quite adamant that everything was ready to go. Said you were on board and just emotional." I let that hang there for a moment. Emotional. "I'm not emotional," I said. "I'm informed, and I have legal representation. Please direct any future communication to her." "I understand. I'm sorry again. I really am." When the call ended, I allowed myself a long, slow exhale. It felt good saying the truth out loud. That house is mine. He doesn't have the legal right. It wasn't just a fact, it was a reclamation. For years, Derek had claimed every space we shared, every room, every decision. Now I was staking my claim. I wandered through the house that morning, touching walls I'd painted, floors I'd refinished, windows I'd chosen during the remodel. I thought about how Derek used to dismiss every design choice I made, calling my tastes too feminine, too bold, too eclectic. I'd always compromised painting things taupe. When I wanted teal, buying light fixtures, he wouldn't scoff at. But this was my home. My name was on the papers. My hands had scrubbed the grout and sanded the cabinets. Every corner whispered my presence. He couldn't erase that. Around noon, I received another message from Derek. "You can't just ignore me. I've already lined up another buyer." I didn't reply. By 2 p.m., Alyssa confirmed the divorce petition was prepped. She'd file it Monday along with a request for a temporary restraining order on asset transfers. By 4 p.m., she had the account statements I'd collected printed, tabbed, and sealed in a thick manila folder. I imagined her sorting them, red pen in hand, fierce as ever. And by dinner time, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened a fresh sketch pad, and began designing a new necklace, one I'd call Inheritance. It would feature a single unbroken loop of hammered silver, textured like scars and lit like moonlight. As the sun dipped below the trees, I felt a sense of motion, like the tide pulling out, revealing a shoreline that had been buried for years. Let Derek pace and fume and threaten. Let him learn what it meant to mistake silence for submission. I hadn't disappeared. I had just been waiting for the right moment to begin. It was barely past 10 the next morning when the doorbell rang, sharp, impatient, insistent. I looked up from my workbench where I'd been setting a tourmaline stone, wiped my hands on a linen cloth, and moved slowly to the front door. I already knew who it was. Through the glass pane, I saw him, Derek, pacing like a caged animal, jaw-tight tie askew, eyes already narrowed. He didn't wait for me to open the door before pounding again. I inhaled once, then turned the knob. "Celeste," he barked, pushing past me into the foyer. What the hell is going on? His cologne hit me first too strong, like he'd doused himself trying to reclaim control. He stopped in the middle of the living room, hands on hips, glaring at the furniture like it had betrayed him. "Trevor says you blocked the house sale," he snapped. "You're not even responding to my texts. What is this game?" "It's not a game, Derek," I said, my voice steady. "This is reality. The house isn't yours to sell." His head snapped toward me. "Excuse me." I walked past him to the coffee table and picked up the manila folder I'd prepared the night before. The weight of it felt almost ceremonial. "You've been making a lot of assumptions lately," I said, handing him the folder. "Time to clear a few things up." He took it with a confused scowl, flipped it open, and scanned the first page. I watched the flicker of recognition flash across his face, our joint account statements highlighting the transfers to that shadow account in bold red ink. Next came the email printouts he'd foolishly left open on our shared tablet, hotel bookings in Las Vegas, transportation charges, cash withdrawals. Then the photos. Derek with a woman brunette, early 30s, laughing beside him in a casino bar. Another of them walking into the Bellagio hands grazing. One of them together at a rooftop dinner. The timestamps all matched his client retreats. He shut the folder with a snap. "You hired a private investigator," he asked, voice hard. "Alyssa did," I said simply. "She's very thorough, and very good at her job." He turned away, rubbing his temples like he was trying to shake loose the consequences. "You're being ridiculous. You know how this looks, but it's not what you think." "Derek," I said, stepping around him, "don't insult both of us." He looked at me for a long moment. There was something flickering beneath his bravado, now fear maybe, or dawning comprehension. "This house," I continued, "was refinanced in my name last year during the renovation. You were too busy to attend the signing, remember? You gave me full power of attorney. The deed is mine. Entirely." He blinked. "No, that's not possible." "It is. And it was your signature." He sank into the armchair like the floor had tilted beneath him. I took no joy in watching him fall apart, but I wasn't going to stop it either. "The joint accounts," I added. "Frozen. As of this morning." Alyssa filed for a court order citing suspicious activity. "The withdrawals. The gambling. The unapproved transfers. You'll be answering for those." His jaw moved, but no sound came out at first. "You're filing for divorce," he said finally. It wasn't a question. "Yes." He stood abruptly, pacing in tight circles. "This is insane. We can talk about this, Celeste. You're upset. You're overreacting." I tilted my head, calm and unmoved. "Overreacting would have been tossing your things into the yard and changing the locks. What I'm doing is lawful, measured, and long overdue." His face flushed deep red. "You were supposed to just let it go. You always let things go." I stared at him. "That's what you counted on, isn't it? That I'd stay quiet? That I'd stay small? That I'd keep pretending nothing was wrong just to protect your pride?" He opened his mouth again, but I cut him off. "I know about the hidden accounts, Derek. The gambling, the affair, the lies. And you know what? I'm not angry anymore. I'm done being angry." He dropped into the couch with a thud, hands clasped between his knees. He looked smaller somehow, his arrogance folded in on itself. "You always made me feel like what I did wasn't real," I said, my voice soft now but firm. "Like my business was just a little craft table in the corner of your empire. But that little hobby is now our only stable source of income. And it's mine. Just like this house." He shook his head slowly, dazed. "I didn't think you'd fight back," he said quietly. I looked at him, not the man I'd married, but the man he'd become. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel intimidated. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel anything for him at all. "That was your biggest mistake," I said. "You underestimated me. But worse, you never really saw me." He sat there silent while the seconds passed thick and slow. The sunlight through the window traced a golden path across the rug undisturbed. Finally, I walked to the door and held it open. "You should go now, Derek," I said. "Any further communication can go through my lawyer." He stood, uncertain, folder still clutched in his hand. "You really think you're better off without me?" "I know I am," I replied. He paused as if waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. And then slowly he walked out down the steps past the rose bushes I'd planted myself into the driveway. He didn't look back. When I closed the door, I locked it not in fear, but in closure. The house was quiet again. Just the ticking of the kitchen clock and the soft hum of my own breath. Quiet power. Relief. Vindication. I went back to my studio and picked up the tourmaline I'd been setting. The stone caught the light just right. This time it gleamed for me. It came in quietly like so many messages do, nestled between order inquiries and thank you notes from clients. I was scrolling through my business Instagram answering a few DMs about custom ring sizes when I saw it. "I didn't know about you. I thought he was divorced." Cassandra. No context. No introduction. Just a single sentence dangling in the space between confrontation and confession. My stomach fluttered not with pain but with a strange detachment, like reading the end of a novel you already knew the plot to. I clicked her profile. Public. Polished. Pretty. Fitness photos, conference selfies, a lot of hashtags about grind culture and elevated mornings. Her bio listed her employer, same accounting firm as Derek. Cassandra. It was a soft name. I could picture her already, the one who laughed at all his jokes, who didn't question when his weekends away didn't align with a conference schedule, who believed the stories because she wanted to. Part of me considered responding, asking when it started, whether she ever came to my house, whether she wore the silver bracelet he claimed was from a boutique but I knew had been bought on clearance from a discount chain. But I didn't reply. I just sat there staring at the message until it blurred slightly on my screen. Not from tears, there were none left, but from something more complex. Something like closure. Derek had always been restless, always looking outward for his worth. A new car, a different title, someone younger, more impressed, less familiar. That's the thing about men like him, they need to feel important, but they can't stand being known too well. Being known means being seen. And Derek couldn't bear reflection. I logged off without responding and walked outside, letting the sun warm my face. My lilacs were blooming. I crouched to clip a few stems and carried them inside, placing them in a ceramic pitcher I'd found at an antique store years ago. Derek had said it was clutter. I kept it anyway. I texted Alyssa, got a message from the mistress. Figures. She called 5 minutes later. Do you want me to handle that? She asked. No, I said. She's not the story. She's not. Alyssa agreed. But I do have some updates that are. I settled into the window seat with a cup of tea. The late morning sun spilled across my bare feet. So Alyssa began, her tone shifting into legal mode. The divorce filing triggered something interesting. Apparently there were several red flags in Derek's accounts. The court has opened a financial misconduct investigation. I blinked. Misconduct? I thought he was just being reckless. Oh, he was. But it wasn't just bad choices. It was deliberate concealment. Those investments he told you about. Let me guess, I said. Poker tables and slot machines, Vegas, Atlantic City, and some online gambling platforms. Thousands gone. Tens of thousands, actually. My throat tightened, not from grief, but disbelief. That much he had this idea he'd win it all back, she continued. That's what his browser history shows. Fantasy wins jackpot simulations. Texts to some guy named Tino, probably a bookie, talking about one more shot. It's pathetic, Celeste. He thought he could fix everything with a lucky streak. I leaned back, processing. And now he's likely facing restitution, Alyssa said. Possibly even criminal charges if they decide to dig deeper into how he tried to liquidate the house. You're safe. The court sees the transfers. We've got the documentation. And the house rock solid. The quiet between us was warm, not heavy. I keep thinking I should feel worse, I admitted. You don't have to feel anything he told you to feel, she replied. Least of all, guilt. I smiled faintly. Thank you, Alyssa. Always. After the call, I sat in the stillness of the house. Not lonely. Just alone in a way that finally felt clean. I could hear the creak of the floorboards, the chirp of birds outside. Even the hum of the refrigerator felt like part of something steady again. On the bookshelf in the hallway, a photo of Derek and me still sat in a silver frame. It was taken 7 years ago in Charleston on a trip I paid for with my first big commission. We were smiling, he with that camera-ready grin, me looking just off to the side like I already knew something was missing. I picked up the frame and turned it face down. There wasn't going to be an explosion. No final scream. No dramatic showdown. Just this quiet truth. He wasn't the man I married, and I was no longer the woman who stayed. The day I moved Derek's old desk out of the home office felt like an exhale I didn't know I'd been holding. It was big and heavy oak with brass handles, the kind of thing meant to impress clients who never saw it. I sold it to a retired teacher who wanted a place to write her memoirs. When she came to pick it up, I helped her load it into a truck, and we both laughed when it wouldn't quite fit at first. After she drove off, I stood in the empty room, bare walls echoing. The carpet still held the faint outline of the desk's legs, a ghost of the man who once insisted he needed a real office to do real work. I ran my fingers over the windowsill, then down to the floor, where I envisioned shelves, a soldering station, a custom workbench. Finally, the studio I'd always imagined. I spent the next few weeks transforming it. The walls went from beige to a deep navy, moody and elegant. I laid down hardwood planks myself, watched YouTube videos, wore knee pads, cursed when I jammed a thumb. Maya came by with paintbrushes and pizza and told me I looked 10 years younger already. Remember when he said navy was too dramatic for a home workspace? She asked, wiping a smear of paint from her cheek. He also said my pricing was wishful thinking, I replied. We both burst out laughing. In the corner of the room, I placed the antique jeweler's bench I'd dreamed of for years, curved wood with tiny drawers, a worn leather apron, a dimmable swing-arm lamp. It had cost more than I usually allowed myself to spend, but I didn't hesitate. It was a gift not just to my craft, but to the woman I'd finally become. The business, once considered a little hobby, had taken on a life of its own. After the divorce news hit our circle, small towns and art communities talk, I began receiving messages from clients I hadn't heard from in months. One of them was the manager of a boutique chain on the West Coast. "We want something exclusive," she wrote. "Your designs are resonating with our audience in a way nothing else has. Can we talk?" We did. By the end of the month, I was shipping out a dozen custom pieces for a limited-run launch. I hired 2 assistants, Brielle, a former art student with a meticulous hand for beadwork, and Elena, a retired silversmith looking to stay busy. Together, we filled orders late into the night, laughing over takeout and listening to true crime podcasts while gemstones caught the lamplight like fire. I started something new, too. Saturday workshops. At first, I wasn't sure anyone would come. I posted a flyer in the library and a few teasers on Instagram, nothing pushy. I cleared space in the dining room, set up folding tables, laid out extra tools. 6 women showed up the first week. The next, it was 9. They came from all walks of life, young, middle-aged, newly divorced, newly brave. We made necklaces and rings bracelets from raw stones and occasionally tear-streaked confessions. "My husband laughed when I said I wanted to try something creative," one woman whispered, as she twisted copper wire with trembling fingers. Said it was a waste of time. I smiled gently, handed her a better set of pliers. "Then let's waste some time together." Every Saturday, my home filled with the smell of fresh coffee, lavender hand cream, and courage. We talked about more than jewelry. We talked about boundaries, about bills, about shame. I didn't teach them just how to create. I reminded them how to claim space. At a local art fair in June, I set up a booth with some of my newest pieces. Business was brisk. People stopped by to compliment the craftsmanship, ask about commissions, take business cards. That's where I saw her, Lila Farrow, the wife of one of Derek's old colleagues. We hadn't spoken since a holiday party 3 years ago when Derek had explained my career as a cute thing Celeste does with beads. She lingered at my booth, fingers grazing a moonstone pendant. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you." She hesitated, then stepped a little closer. "I've been following your story, well, through the grapevine. I just wanted to say, it's inspired me." I tilted my head. "I've been shrinking myself too," she confessed. "In small ways for years. Your story made me realize I don't have to keep doing that." I looked at her, really looked, and I saw it. The flicker of someone on the edge of remembering who she used to be. "You don't," I said. She nodded, once smiled, and walked away. I watched her go, heart full in a way I couldn't name. This was the rebuild not just of my business or my house, but of me. Room by room, stitch by stitch. It didn't happen all at once, and it wasn't easy. There were still quiet moments when doubt crept in, when I caught myself missing not Derek, but the illusion of what we'd been. But those moments passed like shadows through sunlight, and in their place bloomed a life I had shaped with my own hands. The invitation arrived on creamy cardstock, thick and elegant, tucked inside a linen envelope. Mid-State Artisan Gala, a celebration of local craftsmanship and creative vision. I nearly tossed it into the junk mail pile, but something made me pause. I reread it, then again. My name was printed in small proud letters near the bottom, featured guest Celeste Marlowe, jewelry designer. It had been almost a year since Derek left that note on the counter. At first I thought I'd skip it. Too much noise, too many faces, too many memories. But Maya nudged me over dinner. "You have to go," she insisted, stabbing her fork into roasted sweet potatoes. "It's not about showing up. It's about showing who you are now." So I went. I wore a black silk dress, sleek, simple, fierce. Around my neck hung a piece from my latest collection, raw-cut garnet set in oxidized silver, sprawling like ivy over my collarbone. It was bold and unapologetic. Derek would have hated it. I arrived early, nerves fluttering in my chest like trapped moths. The venue was a refurbished greenhouse turned event space filled with soft string lights and the scent of fresh herbs. Murmurs of conversation drifted around me as artists in every medium milled about: ceramicists, metalworkers, textile designers, painters. It was beautiful. "Excuse me," a warm voice said beside me. "You wouldn't happen to be the artist behind that necklace, would you?" I turned to find a tall man with kind eyes and calloused hands. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow and sawdust clung faintly to his cuffs like confetti. "I am," I said, surprised. "Celeste Marlowe, Grant Ellery," he replied, extending a hand. "I make wooden jewelry boxes, mostly reclaimed materials, walnut cherry, sometimes old barn beams." His handshake was firm but gentle, respectful. We started talking, not about relationships or the weather or politics, but about craft, about working with your hands, about the quiet joy of finishing a piece that felt just right. I told him about my process, how I choose stones not just for their beauty but for the energy they carry. He didn't smirk or nod absently like Derek used to. He asked questions, real ones. "Do you ever design a piece and feel like it teaches you something?" he asked at one point. "All the time," I said. "Sometimes I don't know what I'm working through until I see it on the workbench." He smiled, eyes softening. We talked through the entire first course of the meal and barely noticed. And though nothing about the conversation was flirtatious, I felt something unfamiliar and lovely seen. Not dissected, not doubted, just seen. Later in the evening, I stepped outside to get some air. The night was cool, laced with jasmine and the hum of distant laughter. I pulled out my phone to check the time and saw it. A new message. From Derek. I hesitated. Curiosity is a stubborn ghost. I opened it. "Celeste. I've been thinking a lot. I know I messed up. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't appreciate what we had. I hope you're okay. Maybe we could talk sometime. I'm still trying to figure things out. Maybe you are too." I stared at it for a moment. Not out of temptation, but recognition. There it was, the final breadcrumb. A piece of him reaching out not because he wanted to fix what he broke, but because he didn't know how to live with the silence that followed. That was always Derek's struggle. He couldn't stand the absence of admiration. But I didn't owe him my attention anymore. I hit delete and slipped my phone back into my purse. Some doors are better left closed. When I returned to the gala, Grant was talking with a group near the espresso bar. He waved when he saw me, and I smiled back. We chatted once more before the evening ended, and as we exchanged business cards, he said something simple that stayed with me. "You carry strength in your work. It's refreshing, not flashy, not flirtatious, just sincere." I left the gala that night walking taller than I had in months, not because of anything I had gained, but because of what I had let go. On the way home, the city lights flickered in the rearview mirror as the roads grew quieter. I rolled the window down and let the wind tug at my hair. The garnet necklace was cool against my skin, grounding and alive. I thought of all the ways I had been taught to shrink, to apologize for wanting more, to dim myself for someone else's comfort. But tonight, I'd worn my boldest piece, and no one told me it was too loud. Not even me. The dining room still bore faint memories of what it used to be mahogany chairs Derek insisted we keep the hutch his mother gave us as a wedding gift. But now it smelled of coffee and warm solder. The walls were lined with pegboards holding spools of wire trays of gemstones, rows of pliers and hammers. And the laughter filled every crevice. My Saturday workshops had grown beyond what I ever imagined. What started with 6 curious women around a folding table had become a local phenomenon. We now ran 3 sessions a week, and I'd hired Brielle full-time to help me manage the influx. But it was never just about the jewelry. It was the stories. Each woman arrived carrying something, an invisible wound, a broken dream, a voice she hadn't used in too long. They came with fear tucked in their pockets and left with calloused hands and lifted chins. I created a mentorship circle too, a 6-week program for women ready to launch creative businesses of their own. We covered everything: sourcing materials, pricing strategies, how to keep your name on the lease. Alyssa even came by once to give a talk on financial independence and prenups. The room was silent that day, every woman leaning forward, absorbing awakening. One afternoon, I stood at the edge of the room watching them all work. 10 women bent over their benches, shaping copper and silver with quiet concentration. Maya came in with a tray of snacks and winked. "Remember when you told me you were too scared to teach?" she whispered. I smiled. That was before I realized I wasn't alone. My phone buzzed with a new email, subject feature interview, crafting quarterly. I grinned and clicked it open. The editor confirmed the story would run in their next issue front page. The article was titled, "Jewels of Resilience: How One Woman Built a Movement from a Hobby." I sat down at my bench, the antique one, and reached into the small drawer where I kept things that didn't belong to any project, scraps, charms that never made it into collections, and one folded piece of paper. Derek's note. I hadn't looked at it in months, but something nudged me. I opened it gently. "I'm done. I've sold the house. Take what's left. Derek." I read the words again, this time with nothing but a soft laugh. I could still picture the moment I found it, how the paper trembled in my hands, how my breath caught, how the kitchen felt like it was collapsing around me. Now it felt like a relic from someone else's story. I refolded it carefully and slid it back into the drawer. A memory, not a scar. Later that day, during a mentoring session, one of the younger women, Jessa, sat beside me while we polished silver. She glanced at me and asked, "Do you ever regret it?" "Any of it." I turned to her, thinking not just of Derek, but of the entire journey. Late nights sorting receipts, the fear of starting over, the nights I wept into a pillow so no one would hear. "No," I said, "not a single part." I reached into my apron pocket and took out the ring I'd made for myself the day the divorce was finalized. Simple silver, hand-forged, smooth and unpolished. Inside, barely visible, were the words I'd engraved with shaking hands. "Trust your strength." Jessa traced the words with her fingertip. I made it as a promise, I told her, not to forget, and not to settle. She nodded slowly, her own eyes glossy. This life, I continued, gesturing to the room filled with fire and stones and laughter, didn't begin the day he left. It began the day I stopped asking for permission to live it. That evening, I stood on the porch of my home, the home he tried to sell out from under me, and watched as the last student drove away. The porch light flickered softly. Fireflies dotted the garden. Inside, the studio buzzed with quiet electricity tools set neatly for the next day. My calendar was full for the next 6 months: custom orders, collaborations, interviews. There was even a gallery in Chicago asking to feature my work. But more than the accolades, it was the ripple effect that mattered. One woman left her toxic job to start a ceramic line. Another got her first wholesale order for hand-poured candles. and dozens more week after week sat down with trembling hands and left with fire in their eyes. I was no longer trying to reclaim the life I had with Derek. I was building something entirely new, something bold, something unshakable, something mine. And all it took to begin was a cruel little note on a kitchen counter. He thought it would be my ending, but it was only ever my beginning. If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more powerful journeys of resilience and justice. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, sometimes the most unexpected endings lead to the strongest new beginnings. This has been a story from Revenge Served Cold. Thank you for listening.